Hey everybody, Douglas Blair Roberts here, the Super Vader 400 here, and of course the brown skinned human here, back for another review, and this time this is a large, major franchise review. This is another franchise review. This is my review of the entire Street Fighter franchise, starting from Street Fighter 1 and ending with Street Fighter 4, and I give you my thoughts on Street Fighter 5 and the future of Street Fighter, what I want to see from the Street Fighter franchise from now on. So yeah, that's what I want to see. You will also hear Broly, the legendary Super Saiyan, Dragon Ball Z Broly, the legendary Super Saiyan, playing in the background at the end of the video, because I like to multitask now. I like to play video games and review and watch movies at the same time, so that's what you'll hear in the background. But it'll be at the last part, because I accidentally did 30 minutes of the video without it on. So with that being said, I'm talking about everything. When I say Street Fighter franchise, the video games, comics, movies, animes, and television series, everything. I'm talking about everything from the Street Fighter series, and just about every game. Every game will be mentioned except for one, and that is Pocket Fighters. And that's because Pocket Fighters, I always forget about that Street Fighter game, and it's always left out of Street Fighter franchise review, even though I like that game just as much as the other Street Fighters. But that's the only one that's left out of this video. Also, the Street Fighter 2010 is also left out because I don't really consider that a Street Fighter video game. So that's left out of this review right here. To see my previous reviews of Street Fighter 4, and the Street Fighter cartoon series, check the links in the description box below. With that being said, this is also an introduction to what I'm going to be talking about on my channels. I'm going to be talking about the Street Fighter franchise a lot. So with that being said, let's get started right now. Once again, this is my world.
Show you how to knock out a light. I'm the second one of the impacts, the third of the strikes. I'm the resurrection you needed here to bring you to life. I'm the reason you came to season, so you better get high. And I'm punching you with a hurricane, grabbing a knife, and I'm cracking you with a pipe. I came here to fight. Let me show you how to knock out a light. I'm the second one of the impacts, the third of the strikes. I'm the resurrection you needed here to bring
was Tuesday.
You think I'm scared of you punks? Your rear was jump. I see you, all you doing is jump. I'm the reason you run. You should have given me your entry fee. You buy me lunch. I came here to be the best. You ain't taking me, son. 2,000 people and I'm a spread 2001. I came to stare them in the faces when they tell me I'm wrong. Hit them with jump strong. Make you sure you can it's on. The science of a fireball, something to inspire y'all. Starting small, I can hear the evolution to evolve. I'm a nation in its prime. Masterpiece, the greatest kind. Super Street Fighter 4. It's about damn time. I'm the new era, a new age. I slay prey with dash straights and 3 blades. The day Daido bodied you on the big stage was important to you, but for him,
It was Tuesday.
Hey everybody, it's time for part 2 of my review of the entire Street Fighter franchise. Like I did with Mortal Kombat, I'm going to start off with Street Fighter 1 and end with Street Fighter 4. Then I'm going to give you my thoughts on Street Fighter 5. Like I said in part 1, I got into the Street Fighter franchise with the second game, Street Fighter 2 Champions Edition, the sequel to Street Fighter 1 with Street Fighter 1 I'm about to talk about right now. Funny thing about it is, I didn't play Street Fighter 1 until I didn't hear about or play Street Fighter 1 until 9 years 10 to 11 years after I played Street Fighter 2. I played Street Fighter 2 for the first time in 1995, but I didn't hear about Street Fighter 1 until 2005 and 6 when I looked up the history of Capcom video games and purchased Capcom Classic Collections. The version I purchased didn't have Street Fighter 1, but it's in the other version that I never got a chance to get. Street Fighter 1, not the best game ever. The game is clunky. Dated visuals and character designs, but still an awesome fun game to play. I like the character designs even though they're dated by today's standards. I like the character designs and this Ryu with the red slippers, which is one of the many looks I felt they should have kept for modern games and adaptations. Ryu with the red slippers, I think that's pretty cool. And I also like this game for its backstory, the lore. This is Ryu and Ken recently finished their training, and both of them enter the martial arts tournament. Actually, I think Ken enters the martial arts tournament and Ryu fights in a specifically made tournament hosted by Sagat and hosted by Sagat, where he fights a bunch of Muay Thai fighters and Sagat. That's what I heard in the actual lore. In the video game you fight everyone, but in the storyline lore of Street Fighter, Ryu fights Aiden and Sagat and several Muay Thai warriors before that, and Ken stays behind and wins the U.S. martial arts tournament. I think he fights and wins everyone. If you're playing 2 players and number 2 beats Ken, he'll finish the rest of the game. You'll finish the rest of the game as Ken instead of Ryu. Other thing I didn't like about this game is that the other characters, I can understand why in arcade and story mode they wouldn't be available, but I hate that the other characters in the game, Sagat, Aiden, Eagle, Joe, Mike, Retsu, Gin, and Birdie, they're not playable in the 2-player versus mode. How much fun is that, playing as Ryu and Ken, the same 2 characters all day? That would get really, really boring, and that's why this game didn't last long. That's why this game didn't receive the fanfare as any of its sequels when it came out. But this is still a fun game to play, and the sound is so hilariously bad that it's nostalgic hearing that there are world's strongest fighters all over the world. So Yeah, Street Fighter 1. Not the best game ever, but still a fun game to play. And I like this game storyline wise. It criminally needs to be remade with today's technology, and the complexity of Alpha 3 and 4 is what Street Fighter 1 needs. With cutscenes, dialogue, and faster gameplay is what Street Fighter 1 needs. Because storyline wise, I do love this game and still enjoy playing it today. And it's one of the best video games of the 80s in my opinion. So yeah, Street Fighter, after the ill-received Street Fighter, the Capcom creators, I don't remember them at the moment and don't feel like looking them up. Um, Ono, I think that's his name. Ono and some of the people got together and they made Street Fighter 2. Street Fighter 2, The World Warrior, and there were four versions of this game. However, I only recognize two versions. I only recognize two and sometimes one version of the game. There was Street Fighter: The World Warrior, which Ryuken and Sagat returned from the first game, along with five other five other new challengers with 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 one of my favorites, Guile, the U.S. Special Forces Major, Chun Li, the Interpol police officer, E Honda, the sumo, Zangief, the wrestler, Blanca, Blanca, the mutant, the mutant, the mutant monster, and Dhalsim, the fire, the fire guy. That's it for the playable characters. Unplayable or the four boss characters: Balrog, the boxer; Vega, um, the Spanish ninja and cage fighter; and I mentioned Sagat already, and the main antagonist of the game, M. Bison, who each of these characters' names were switched around. In the original Japanese version, Bison is Vega, Vega is Balrog, and Balrog is Bison. But they didn't want a lawsuit from Mike Tyson at the time, so they completely they changed their names around, and this occasionally leads to confusion online with people from other countries like Japan and America when discussing Street Fighter characters and lore. So yeah, um, yeah, um, yeah, Street Fighter 2. Then they made a small update which featured tougher gameplay, and made the four boss characters playable. That's Bison, Sagat, Vega, and Balrog. Then they made, I don't consider this a new version. If you click on the hyperlink on the video game, they made Street Fighter Street Fighter Hyper Fighting, which feature alternate palette swipe costumes and faster gameplay. But it's the same thing as Champions Edition, just palette swipe costumes and faster gameplay. Don't recognize either of these as a new game. Finally, in '93, to compete with Mortal Kombat 2, the hugely popular Mortal Kombat 2 video game, they released Street Fighter 2 Turbo, the new challengers, which added Fei Long, DJ, Cammy, and T-Hawk. Then they made a small update to that called Street Fighter 2 Turbo, the Grandmaster, which this game added super combos, and if you beat the game without losing, which I've never been able to do, you fight you fight a secret character called Akuma, which is based on Ryu's win quote. If you have to defeat Shenlong, to stand a chance. A lot of people misinterpret this as Ryu talking about his master, but instead he was talking about his Dragon Punch finishing maneuver. So they stuck to those rumors and added Akuma, who comes out of nowhere and straight up murders Bison with his Shingatsu no Hado. Akuma, he was the only character in the series with a fatality because he's a dark and violent character. So yeah, I've never been able to beat this game. I actually saw a playthrough to see how it's done, but I've never been able to beat this game. The turbo versions are extremely hard. While I prefer the turbo versions for graphics, visuals, and gameplay enhancements and everything, when it comes to overall play, when it comes to overall playing, I prefer the original Street Fighter 2s. They're much easier to play. They're much easier to play. Turbo, I can barely get past the first opponent without losing. And of course, since I always wanted to, I've only beaten Turbo one time. I've only beaten Turbo one time, but since I always wanted to unlock Akuma, I always start over every time I lose, because I always wanted to fight Akuma like it is in the storyline. Um, yeah, yeah. So yeah, Street Fighter Turbo. Before I continue with the Street Fighter franchise, Street Fighter would be so popular they would adapt Street Fighter from mangas, various various comic books. The most popular being the comic books produced by Udon, which adapts the entire Street Fighter Street Fighter, Street Fighter 2, Street Fighter 2 Turbo, Street Fighter 4, Ultra Street Fighter 4. They even adapt some elements of the Street Fighter 3 stuff, but I keep forgetting what it's called. They've also recently crossed over with the GI Joe characters, characters in this series. Also explains some of the video games, video games canon, such as revealing that the character Cody from the Final Fight franchise, is the strongest character in the Street Fighter. Is the strongest human character in the Street Fighter mythos without enhancements and stuff, without power ups and enhancements. Yeah. So yeah um yeah. But then around this time they made two live action films. The first was Street Fighter 2, the anime, widely considered video game based movies, one of the best video game based movies of all time, and another infamous Jean Claude Van Damme live action film. I like both, with the anime obviously being superior, but there were several things I like better about the live action, which I'm about to get to. Let's start off with the anime. Love the anime, especially in the Japanese version, which I just recently got to see, and it blows the English version out of water. The English version is entertaining and all, but with all the music and stuff is kind of cheesy by today's standards. The Japanese version is timeless. Is timeless, and was the way this show series that movie was meant to be watched. The dramatic music, especially the song that plays when Ryu and Ken are fighting Bison, man, so nostalgic and awesome, man. Awesome. It was awesome as a child. Awesome as a child, seeing these characters come to life in the film. It's even better as an adult. And one of the many things I like about this game. This movie was so popular. Not game. This movie was so popular. It inspired one of my favorite portions of the Street Fighter franchise. In my opinion, one of the best story-wise. That's the Street Fighter Alpha series, which is a sequel to Street Fighter 1 and a prequel to the Street Fighter 2 series. As such, they feature younger versions of the characters. This entire trilogy, 1, 2, and 3, are awesome, with Street Fighter Alpha 3 obviously being the best if I had to choose, followed by 2 and then 1. But I like each version, with 1 and 2 having better stage designs, and Street Fighter Alpha 3 having more modes, and overall more content, and featuring every character that has ever appeared in the Street Fighter canon. But that's one of the many things I loved about Street Fighter 2. It gave us the Alpha series. Then of course there was the live action movie. I still like this movie. It's not the masterpiece I thought it was when I saw it back in 98. But when I saw it back in 98, it was the greatest thing ever. I knew there was a Street Fighter anime and cartoon, but I had no idea Street Fighter was a live action live action film. I was too young to see the original release of this movie, but seeing this movie was awesome. And when I was flipping through the channels, I turned to USA, and right there, I saw right there every character was recognizable. Every character was recognizable, with the exception of Ken and Ryu. They were once I saw that first fight scene where they beat up where they beat up Sagat's thugs, and they did the signature monkey flip. Okay, yeah, that's Ken and Ryu. But Guile and Bison talking to each other, I immediately recognized both Van Damme and Julia as Bison, Bison and Guile respectively. And it was kind of weird. Like I thought Ryu was the lead character. Technically, they're all main characters in that move in the Street Fighter Two series, but it's Ryu who is the lead character. Ryu and Ken who are the lead characters. I thought they were the lead characters in the game, but it was Guile. It was Guile. That was weird. And Balrog, wasn't he a bad guy? And he was a good guy in this movie, so that was always weird. Now that I'm older and understand the fiction, I can see the problems. And only two problems I have with this movie. The first problem is the characters, and the director did this on purpose. The characters in the movie, other than a couple of scenes, other than scenes when they're fighting Bison's thugs and Sagat's thugs, they appear to be ordinary people, ordinary fighters and realistic people. When in the game, they're extremely powerful, being able to smash bricks and cars. Balrog once killed an elephant with a punch. They're super strong, but in this movie, you don't see much of that in this movie right here. Um, that's the first problem I had. And the guy, he said he wouldn't remove all fantasy elements after the poor reception of Super Mario Brothers, one of the previous video game live action adaptations. The next problem I had with this movie was the new challengers. The original 8 and 12 warriors was good. Was good. The original 12 warriors, their designs and character and depictions were pretty awesome. Pretty awesome. Some, in my opinion, like Zangief, Honda, and Balrog, in my opinion, were better than their video game counterparts. As was Ken, were better than their video game counterparts. And Bison, personality-wise, was better than his video game counterpart. But characters like DJ, Cammy, and T-Hawk, and Sawada, who's a stand-in for Fei Long, were just absolutely terrible. They were all Asian, Indian, and British versions, female versions of Guile. Cammy was the best out of the new challengers in the film, but all four of them were absolutely terrible, especially Sawada, Sawada. So yeah, yeah. But I like this movie. I still enjoy this movie. Today, and I consider this movie an alternate world Street Fighter, not an alternate retelling of Street Fighter like all the other adaptations, but an alternate world Street Fighter, and still entertaining today. There are two other things I like better about this film now. One was the video game tie-in with this film, which they created. They created two Street Fighter games with with um with the actors from the film. The first is the first is the first was the arcade version, which is the superior version. Then there's the console version, which is similar to Street Fighter 2. The game is like a hybrid of Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter, and Killer Instinct. And it's awesome. I still consider this one of the best. I consider this one of the best fighting games ever. It has a mixed to negative reception amongst people. Yeah, the next thing I like about this is creating one of my favorite things from the Street Fighter franchise, and in my opinion, one of the best from the Street Fighter franchise, and that's the Saturday morning Street Fighter cartoon. Man, is this cartoon awesome, man. This cartoon is one of those things that's even better as an adult. Yeah, it's corny, cheesy, but there's strong writing, good animation in season 2, and lots of Street Fighter lore, and actually corrected some of the mistakes and stuff from the live action film. This borrowed elements from the film, the Street Fighter 2 video game series, the first two alpha games, and even the final fight. The final fight game, which is one of the best episodes of the series. Fans consider that one of best, this show also has several cool scenarios like Gao and Bison teaming up to battle Akuma and Ken defeating Akuma. I thought Ken in this cartoon was better than he was in the video games. Yeah. So yeah, this has a mixed to negative. This has the mixed to negative reception amongst fans. But one thing I like is that unlike most shows in the '90s, this actually got a proper finale, finale and resolution with the Street Fighters finally defending Bison, seemingly defeating him once and for all. But I wish they could have lasted longer because I would love to have seen the Street Fighter 3 storyline adapted here and the Alpha 3 portion where Cody goes to jail. So yeah, that was what you call it. Let's spin off from Street Fighter moment to talk about the Final Fight franchise. The Final Fight. I've only played the very first Final Fight game, and man, is that game awesome. Playing as Guy, Cody, and Hager, playing as Guy, Cody, and Hager with Guy, Cody, and Hager with Cody obviously being the best of the three. Being the best of the three, you play a Streets of Rage style beat 'em up game, Streets of Rage Double Dragon style Street Fighter beat 'em up game. This was developed. This was initially developed as a Street Fighter game. Guy and Cody remind me of Ryu and Ken in this game. But yeah, and you fight and you go through Metro City to rescue Jessica from the Mad Gear game and the animation adaptation. Apart from the inclusion of Ryu and Ken, was an awesome adaptation of this first video game. There's also sequels involving several new characters like a female character, Moxie, who is vastly similar to Mai Shiranuyu from the SNK Fatal Fury and King of Fighters franchise. So yeah, Street Fighter. So Final Fight, awesome game. Let's also talk about Street Fighter was so awesome that they crossed over with one of the coolest things I saw in '98. In '98, when I walked into the toy store and the video game arcade. When I walked into the toy store and the video game arcade, I saw Street Fighter characters bundled together with Marvel characters in the toy store. Then when I walked into the arcade, I saw Capcom Street Fighter versus Marvel superheroes, the Marvel superheroes from the animated cartoon, the '90s Marvel animation universes. And I thought that was the coolest thing ever. That was the most bizarre and coolest thing ever. These two franchises coming together for a video game. I was blown away. Never I thought with Street Fighter, Capcom, Mega Man, and them crossover with the Marvel characters, man. And each game was awesome. Each game was awesome and better than the last. You started off with X-Men versus Street Fighter, which I thought had one of the best female rosters. Both of those games had Apocalypse as the boss character. Then Marvel versus Street Fighter, which was considered a lesser sequel, but I thought this was an awesome sequel. They had lesser characters, and I was disappointed that the PlayStation versions did not play like their arcade versions. They got rid of the tag team feature due to disc constraints, something like that. But they were still awesome games, and the PlayStation versions were great if you didn't own a Saturn, if you didn't own a Sega Saturn at the time. But awesome games, and I love the larger than life gameplay. Each character is given a larger blast, Ryu and Ken are given larger Hadoukens. Ryu has a Hadouken that goes across the screen like Goku's Kamehameha wave and Kenshiro's energy attack from Fist of the North Star. North Star. Then you have what else? Yeah, larger than life gameplay, super easy combos and special maneuvers similar to the Dragon Ball and anime based fighting games that you would see later in those games and the Super Smash Brothers series. This is made for kids and it's not the technical fighter that its Street Fighter counterparts was. Then you had the follow-up Marvel vs. Capcom series, Marvel vs. Capcom 1, 2, Marvel vs. Capcom 1, 2, 3, and 4, with 1, 2, and 4 being the best in my opinion, and I consider 3, Marvel vs. Capcom 3, to be the worst of the series because this was a game in 2011, and it was the same thing as Marvel vs. Capcom was in '95. And after seeing what DC did, Mortal Kombat did with the DC license, where not only did they bring these characters together, but they brought them together with a storyline, I wanted the same for Marvel vs. Capcom. They will finally do that in Marvel vs. Capcom 4. Marvel vs. Capcom 4, but all the others are just characters coming together fighting. There's some small piece of story, but it's mostly just characters coming together fighting each other. And I didn't like that in 2011. In 2011, so yeah, each game is good with Marvel vs. Capcom 1, 2, and 4 being the best, and 3 being the worst. But 3 is still a good Xbox 360 PS3 game. PS3 game. Then before all of that, you had Marvel Superheroes, a beat 'em up fighting game starring the '90s Marvel characters Iron Man, Juggernaut, Cyclops, Wolverine, Cyclops, um, from Cyclops and the Incredible Hulk and War Machine from the from the various '90s cartoons. And this whole thing was an adaptation of the Infinity Gauntlet storyline with Thanos as the boss character of the game, And before that, you had X-Men: Children of the Atom, a Street Fighter Alpha style X-Men series that was revolutionary because they would do something that would be later be seen in that would later be popularized by Mortal Kombat 3, and that was knocking people to another plane. That was knocking people to another plane, to another level, or another part of the screen. That would become hugely popular in Mortal Kombat 3, but Street Fighter already did it here. So yeah, that was the Marvel vs. Capcom series. That was a Marvel vs. Capcom series. Then in '97 they did Fighter 3. Street Fighter 3, which I also consider one of the best Street Fighters in the franchise. I consider Street Fighter Turbo, Alpha 3, Alpha 3, Third Strike, and and um and 4 in the movie, in my opinion, to be the best Street Fighter games. Then you had so yeah, Street Fighter 3, awesome game. This game has a mixed to positive reception. Lots of people like it for its improvised graphics, game and gameplay, adding this move where you can block, where you can telegraph and block hits called parrying, and graphics and storyline and graphics. But a lot of people hate it for its brand new roster in place of several established characters. It's a completely new generation with only Ryu, Ken, Chun-Li, and Akuma returning from the previous series. And there's a new protagonist and a wrestler named Alex. And there's 2 new main antagonists in Gil and his younger half brother Uri. And in my opinion, 2 of the bio humans, 2 of the best and underrated characters in the Street Fighter mythos. Since there are not a lot of adaptations of Street Fighter 3, you don't really get to see much of these characters, but I think these are 2 of the best characters in Street Fighter right here. Like I said, awesome game, awesome storyline. The storyline is so complex. Apart from the tournament, I can barely remember what it was. It's something about Gil and the Illuminati and him doing something. One of the best storylines in Street Fighter. In the Street Fighter canon. This and Alpha, in my opinion, are some of the best. Were some of the best in storylines for the Street Fighter series. Then, of course, you have 3 games. You have Street Fighter 3, The New Warriors, Double Impact, which Double Impact is the second best, with Third Strike, the last version, being the best. Third Strike. Then the new challenge, the first version, is the third best. But I like all 3 video games, and actually prefer Double Impact storyline wise. Prefer Double Impact over Third Strike, but video game wise, Third Strike is way better. So yeah, that was Street Fighter 3. Then of course you got Street Fighter. Then around this time, SNK would develop a reputation for making fighting games, making Fatal Fury, The Art of Fighting, which that is one universe right there, with the Fatal Fury being set in the early '90s and Art of Fighting being set in the '70s and '80s, '70s and '80s, and and as a prequel to the Fatal Fury franchise. Then you had the spin-off sequel, King of Fighters, which is a tag team based fighting game, fighting game set in an alternate world of 1994. That way, the Fatal Fury and Art of Fighting characters can play alongside the King of Fighter characters without aging them. They would develop a reputation for developing fighting games, and the rivalry would become fierce with the SNK people producing Art of Fighting and having two Ryu and Ken knockoffs and Ryo and Robert Garcia. So Capcom would respond by creating the Den character who became popular in Street Fighter Alpha. Finally, these two companies put their differences aside and came together for Capcom versus SNK, the Millennium Fight in 2000. The Millennium Fight in 2000, and I couldn't believe it. These two video game characters came together. I was already familiar with the Fatal Fury and Art of Fighting characters, and the Samurai and Hanamaru, I think that's his name, Hanamaru, from the main protagonist of the Samurai Showdown games. But I was not familiar with the King of Fighters, and this game right here introduced me to the King of Fighters, and now I'm a huge fan of the King of Fighters video game franchise, and yeah, this introduced me to Kyo, Iori, and all those characters. Terry, Andy, Joe, Robert, and Garcia. I already knew, and Ryo. I already knew who these characters were. But it introduced me to those characters. They came together for a cool tag team style video game where you can play as two different styles. You can play as the SNK style, or you can play as the Capcom style. I very much prefer the Capcom style. Which is you can do single combat or 3-on-3 team combat. The game is awesome. There are multiple characters, but most of the storyline mostly revolves around Akuma, who has a brand new Shin Akuma form that showed up, I think, in 3, according to Wikipedia, and Rugal, the main antagonist of Street Fighter, of the King of Fighters series. The matchup between those two is what is the main storyline of this game. There was also a sequel, 2001, Millennium Fight 2001 and 2002, which came out in 2002. I thought this video game right here was even better than its predecessor. But the shock value was gone because you saw it in one. But I thought this was even better. Then the worst of the trilogy, Capcom Fighting Evolution, which was supposed to be a better game called Capcom All Stars, and this was just leftovers from that game and the SNK series. And SNK left the fighting game industry, so leaving Capcom to produce a game all their own. This is the weakest of the trilogy, of the anthology, but this is still a good fighting game. It was just behind its time. A fighting game in 2004, I expected much better from a fighting game in 2004, and this did not deliver. It was the same stuff. It was the same stuff from 97 and 2000 and 95, 97, and 2000, that's what this video game right here was, and I just thought that was disappointing. They should have added more characters from the Capcom games. Since this was a Capcom game, they should have added more characters from other Capcom franchises and a huge story mode. One of the coolest things about this game was Pyron as the boss character, having characters from obscure franchises like Red Earth and Darkstalkers, another cool Capcom fighting game franchise, and also introducing this new superpowered female character called Ingrid, which is the most popular character in this game, and one of the most popular and secret characters in the Street Fighter mythos. So yeah, Capcom Fighting Evolution, not the best game ever, dated, but still fun to play. So that was the Street Fighter. That was the Street Fighter series. After this, there would just be various remakes and revisions of the same game. That was until 2000. Oh wait, before we get to that, they also made. Before I get to that, they also made another revision, a CGI revision similar to Mortal Kombat 4 called Street Fighter EX. EX. There are multiple versions of this game. I've only played the PlayStation 2 version of this game, which I think is Street Fighter EX 2 or 3. I think it's EX 2. I don't remember, but I only played the PlayStation 2 version. It's a CGI version of Street Fighter Alpha and Turbo, which is pretty cool. Which is pretty cool. And there's several new characters like a samurai named Akira, who is vastly similar to Bishamon from the Darkstalkers franchises, and several other weirdos. When you beat the game, a final fight mini game at the end where you beat the game, where you fight a bunch of characters during the credits. Really awesome stuff. And then of course um what else about the Street Fighter franchise? Oh yeah, but after this, there would just be various remakes and revisions of the same games. Finally, in 2008, Street Fighter with a brand new roster. I mean, Street Fighter, they came back with a brand new game, a brand new storyline, a brand new storyline, storyline with the game. Street Fighter 4 is set in between Street Fighter 2 and Street Fighter 3. This was the final major send off of the original generation of Street Fighter, and showed you how we got from Street Fighter 2, how we moved from Street Fighter 2 to Street Fighter 3, where Street Fighter 3 is canonically the last Street Fighter game in the series. Chronologically, is the last video game in the Street Fighter series. But Street Fighter 4, awesome, awesome stuff. I can even forgive the flaws. One of the main flaws is the video game. The video game in the trailers, they said they promised some brand new gameplay, a system similar to boxing, a brand new fighting system. This was the same thing as Street Fighter 2, Turbo, Alpha, and 3, which is what this was. And actually, it was a slower version of those. Those games, in my opinion, are much better. But this game right here, I love the enhancements they made to the franchise. Instead of storyboards with writing on them when the characters interact with each other, no, this game has characters talking to each other with voice acting, and when they meet a special character, they will have special dialogue and will talk before, after, and even during the fight. I love the improvised HD graphics, character designs. They look better in the previous games, but I love the updated HD DVD style graphics this video game had. Next is so yeah, Street Fighter. They will make several updates. With the Super Street Fighter 4 versions being vastly similar to the original Street Fighter 4 in 2008. I consider them all one game. Just the updated versions have features that should have been in the first one, like the Super Street Fighter 4 brought in Cody and even gave him a brand new rap song by a guy named Red Rapper, and then they made Ultra Street Fighter 4, which added Hugo and some of the Final Fight characters. So yeah, and Ultra Street Fighter 4 will be the last major Street Fighter game they release until they made. Now I'm gonna give my thoughts on this. Is the Street Fighter franchise for a while. Oh no, before I continue, one thing I forgot to mention was Alpha. They also made Street Fighter Alpha, the anime film, which I think storyline wise was vastly superior to the Street Fighter 2 anime, but not production wise, but storyline wise, I thought this one was vastly superior. Mostly because I think the Alpha portion of Street Fighter was always better than Street Fighter 2, but yeah, this has a mixed reception amongst people. Some like it, some don't. There was also Street Fighter 2 Victory, which is a Street Fighter anime television series from the same creators of the anime film, of the quote-unquote anime film. Now, the anime film, now even though it's from the same creators, one thing I don't like, neither version have anything to do with each other. Neither version neither version have anything to do neither version have anything to do with each other. So that was one disappointment right there. That was one disappointment right there. And the show takes several liberties with the Street Fighter canon, but it's still an entertaining series, especially from episode 8 all the way to the end of the series, where they get more into Street Fighter lore with more characters from the Street Fighter franchise making an appearance, and the characters Ryu and Ken learning the Hadoukens and squaring off with characters like Sagat, Vega, and Bison. That's when it really gets good. And they most recently made Street Fighter Legend of Chun-Li, which was kind of terrible, but I enjoyed it. That was a great prequel and alternate Batman Begins Smallville style Street Fighter film. The film, in my opinion, had terrible character designs, and it didn't have all the Street Fighter characters. I saw they tried to do. They should just made another Street Fighter film, an accurate version of Street Fighter. But this was pretty good. And one thing I liked about this was this had a younger Bison and McDonald. It featured the return of Robin Shao, Liu Kang from Mortal Kombat 95 as the weaker but still capable again, and it also featured characters being powerful like their video game counterparts were. That was one thing I liked better about this film in comparison to the Van Damme film. Then they most recently made the web series and web movie. It's both Street Fighter Assassin's Fist, which was a great alternate retelling of Street Fighter 1, which is a great Street Fighter 1 and Alpha, which they would have took a better liberties with adapting, which they would have stayed closer to the source material with adapting 1 and had Ryu and Ken competing in the tournament like in Street Fighter 1, which in my opinion is much easier to adapt than Alpha, and 2, which Street Fighter 2 is the next one they adapted. They've even did Street Fighter Resurrection where they adapted 3. I've only seen 1 to 3. I've only seen one to 2 episodes of this, and this was a pretty good web series and movie. Too. They did this to set up the next game I'm about to talk about, Street Fighter 5. Street Fighter 5. Haven't played this game yet, but the only thing I cared about was the story. Was the storyline? Which the storyline is very weird and very heavily flawed. I barely remember what it was. I was mostly watching the Fighters Den's review and rant on this story where they horribly misused Guile. One of the many things I don't like. This, in my opinion, is one of the weakest Street Fighters because Capcom said they weren't sure there was ever going to be a sequel to Street Fighter 4 because a new Street Fighter game would take a huge budget and huge money. And all they did was take Street Fighter 4, recolors, add some new skins, and also update the graphics. They didn't create a new game at all. So I was disappointed the gameplay is the same thing as the other Street Fighters. But I like how this game, for including the story mode. I also like the fact that a lot of the downloadable content about this game was not released right away. You got to pay for that. So that's why, yeah. But I'm definitely looking forward to this game, Street Fighter 5. And once Street Fighter 5 is done, I want to see Street Fighter 6. What happened after Street Fighter 5? And I like how it bridges the gap between Street Fighter 4 and 3 to show you how we got to Street Fighter 3. Because in Street Fighter 3, Shadaloo, Bison, and them are no longer around anymore, and you learn why in this game right here. So yeah, well, this was my review of the Street Fighter franchise. All right, I'm done for now. Happy that I didn't take as long as I thought I would. Sorry I went several minutes without movies or video games in the background. My shoulder's kind of bothering me, like I said, if I didn't mention that in part 1 already. So with that being said, I'm done for now. Time to hit my music.